Woosah.
Let me see if I can.
We're on.
We're on. We're about to go on now.
Okay, you get the questions.
Bruce,
Yep.
mute your phone, Bruce.
Why is it
My
telling
phone?
me?
Your phone, because your phone be ringing when the show is on.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I lost my phone
Oh,
between.
that's why you're not responding?
Yeah, that's why I
Okay.
couldn't
Oh,
respond.
oh, oh no. Yeah, as you guys are talking. Okay.
Okay.
I can't hear you.
I
Your
would
mic.
like the guests to introduce themselves before we start our discussion.
I am Joe Gaskins, chairman of the African American Medical Cannabis Association.
I'm Lisa Ellis, business owner, entrepreneur, applicant, former applicant for a medical marijuana license, and a member of the Maryland Business Clergy Partnership.
And my name is Bruce Branch, and ditto for me.
Okay. All right. So we're gonna start. We're gonna start. We're gonna be discussing recreational and medical cannabis, and we're gonna have another guest coming later on in this discussion. So the first question is, who regulates medical cannabis in the state of Maryland? Anyone can
Should I
answer?
respond? Yeah, I'll respond. That's the Maryland Medical Cannabis Commission. It was created by the General Assembly to basically serve as the entity so that government would be separated from the process. And I'm sure the reason why it was created as a separate entity, one of the reasons was that cannabis is not legal on a federal level. So they did not want to attach it to any of the state government, and also that it's a traditional way that the General Assembly has of dealing with different creations of the governor and of the state of Maryland. They basically give it its own entity, so it will not have so much interference or illegal maneuvering by the
Mhm.
General Assembly and the governor.
Okay. Anyone else want to make a comment or answer?
No, I think Joe really covered it all.
Okay. The next question, who regulates cannabis if it is approved in November?
That's a good question. I'll
Question.
respond to that since I responded to the other one. I would say that it's a possibility it could come under the same commission, even though there's uh, a difference between the two. The
Mhm.
first bill, it creates medical cannabis and it allocates a more strict requirement for the product. The second, this time around, it's recreational. So it has no limits in terms of medical or patient responsibility. So it's the jury's still out on how the General Assembly is going to deal with that after it passes. If it passes in
Mhm.
November, it will go to the General Assembly, and when it goes to the General Assembly, it will then be crafted in a bill, and the bill will then spell out all of those things that who regulates it, and who participates and how they participate.
Okay, Mr. Branch.
Um, uh, Joe pretty much has covered it all, but I guess the main purpose of our dialogue tonight is to evaluate the fairness and the equity of the system.
Mhm.
African Americans have been basically shut out of the system, and what I mean by that, processing and growing, get where the major licenses are, and will it be the same in the future as we move forward for the if it is legalized, will we
Mhm.
still be shut out, or will we receive um, our fair share of licenses? I do believe that um, the person that we're hoping to become governor will be very, very supportive. He's very aware of this issue, and but we're going to have to get major support in the legislature, and many of the people who in the legislature that are African American have not really taken a serious look. That's just my opinion at the consequences, and of course of the great opportunities that lie before us in this field.
Okay. Miss Ellis?
Question 4 has not been pushed, and as you saw from previous shows with you, that not everyone is up to speed on the benefits or some of the barriers that African Americans have in getting into the industry. With medical marijuana, African Americans had to actually, or minorities in general, had to sue the state to even get additional licenses added for medical. And given we have the third highest arrests and many other incidents of marijuana, we have not addressed yet how to equitably play or put African Americans at the top of the priorities in making sure that we secure these licenses. So with question 4 being on the referendum this November, what I would like to see voters be more engaged or educated rather on how to narrow down the language to secure that we're at the table in an ownership position for recreation.
All right, Mr. Elliott.
I don't. I mean, you all said basically everything about the process that one could imagine. I don't have anything more to add.
Okay.
Beyond that, there's not only going to be the bill for the recreational implementation, but
Mhm.
there's possibilities through a variety of bills, whether it be bills related to expungement, related to tax appropriations, related to health aspects, the zoning.
Mhm.
In Baltimore City, I'm sure it's going to be a contest like liquor stores. For there's going to be some neighborhoods that would like dispensaries, and there's going to be others that adamantly oppose having dispensaries. So there's going to be bills beyond just the one bill that will have a
Mhm.
lot of impact on how this is implemented, from where the dispensaries are to who gets the licenses to how the tax money is spent, which is one of the most important aspects. And it's going to be a really, really tough fight. We saw what happened with Senator Carter's legislation last year, which was, I'd argue, is probably some of the best legislation in the country that's been proposed for the impact it would have had in the cottage licenses, in the expungement, in the reparations, in the tax spending, etc. And that bill, I don't even know if it got a hearing. So if that was a fight, we're going to have another fight this year. But I would like to talk with Lisa and Joe about something we've been interfacing with over the past week. That is the potential additions that we're discussing for a hypothetical patient and hospice use bill. So Martin Mitchell is helping with the Sheffield family. They're pushing for the ability uh, for cannabis to be prescribed in hospices and to be used inside of medical facilities. So again, that's a multi-layer bill between the government allowing it, between what money the facilities get or potentially lose out on related to it. And I thought if it was going to be such a bill, we can help to address the absolute lack of inclusion and diversity in the medical industry by creating a non-traditional license specific for the city of Baltimore in each district, where rather than it being chosen by the governor's panel, not any insult on the governor, but just so there's local powers, that a Senate panel can do it, or representatives that the senators send forth can do it, which can help to get people access to the market, which can help have better control on where the city spends that money as well, I believe.
Okay.
And I think if we could take a step backwards, I would like to illuminate another issue with this entire paradigm. I find it quite interesting that there's been, like, unlike many issues, gambling, which comes to mind, there have not been a lot of TV commercials. There's not been a lot of publicity about this bill, and I think that's
Exactly.
purposeful. Yeah, I think that's being done on purpose. The major companies that have these licenses do not want to share the market. And as we all know through economics, macroeconomics, that the first one to market usually wins. These people have already had 3 to 4 years head start.
10.
So they're not really interested in new competitors. They're not really interested if it becomes legalized, giving up a share of that market. I think what Ms. Elliott said in terms of it going into hospice, I think that still would come under medicinal marijuana. My major concern, and we had this discussion with the chair of the Black Caucus, Darrell Bonds, many times, is that a lot of these licenses uh, we just don't have access to, and there
Mhm.
has not been a fair playing ground, and that's been my speech. That's been my thought in each time that I've spoken to uh, to the General Assembly. It's just not fair. No matter what, wind energy was another one. It's just not fair. And when is there going to be a sense of fairness um, placed upon new industries that are in our great state?
Okay. Okay. Makes me think. Okay, so if a person wanted to know more about question 4, and where would they go?
See, that's the Maryland legislator.
Okay.
It is when they voted in on April 1st to make this a referendum, the burdens of making sure that voters know what they're voting for. What exactly does that mean? I mean, this is going to be legalized for adult use, like liquor stores.
Mhm.
But there's a lot of input. What Bruce is saying with Joe and other layers that comes, individuals that have been in prison for this expungement. When we're talking about having access to cultivation licenses and creating urban boutiques, there's a drill down of what this actually means to the public, and our legislators that voted to take this to the public should be educating the public, their individual districts, on what exactly this means for the state. Tax dollars, community engagement, ownership, all of the
Mhm.
above.
And you got to remember too, there's another dynamic on this business octopus. Many people grow their own. Maryland is a rural state, so many people. What legislation will be out there to prohibit or to allow the growing of marijuana in the convenience of your home? For
Mhm.
instance, in the Washington D.C., which I consider to be a very progressive place, you can grow. I think it's up to two plants. Have two plants in your home. I think you could smoke out on your own property. And then the other people have, as Lisa said, the boutique shops where you might go in and buy a T-shirt, but you get marijuana along with the T-shirt in DC. So how are we going to
Hmm.
compete? How you didn't know that,
Yeah,
huh?
I
uh,
mean, to,
how,
to to go beyond what Bruce is saying, like it's for all intents and purposes legal for any individual to just sell cannabis in DC. Not even if you have a storefront. They have what people call a
Oh,
sticker rule. If you provide somebody a sticker in cannabis, that's legal. You just have to provide something besides the cannabis that people are paying for. So, I mean, just to be frank, Bruce, from a market that of people that I know, we're not competing. Maryland's medical cannabis is extremely expensive, not just to enter the market, but just, relatively speaking. DC has a lot of quantity along with a lot lower prices, along with just you can get it, whether it's in a store, get it delivered, blah, blah, blah. So,
oh.
what the industry that we've already created is really really inefficient for getting more people in the market, and it has also the reverse effect of the people who are in the market who did not enter with enough capital. They're going to be pushed out because they're going to have to sell because they had loans at just such high interest rates and are not selling high enough, blah, blah, blah. So there's even that impact that I don't really know what the long-term impact is. Lisa, do you know what happens if somebody who has a license, if they go bankrupt, can they transfer it? Do they sell back to the state? Do what's known?
Well, the licenses are not transferable. The individuals will have to apply, and the Maryland Cannabis Association controls that process. That's why it says, when we're looking at the laws and how the laws apply, especially to us, we're more likely not able to qualify financially. And when we do look at loans or having investors, the way that the financial portfolios are made up, eventually you will have a balloon like a mortgage and eventually go out of business. So while we're moving or rushing to move into recreational, those types of scenarios have not been answered. We have not closed the gap on participation and securing that, one, we can retain our businesses, two, we can even enter the market, because there's no reason that there's a cap on the number of licenses in Maryland, but there's also no reason to say that profit margins will be lowered if we remove the cap or have greater access for African Americans at the table. So moving forward, those are issues that we need to address and that we can address, especially now with a new governor and a lot of new legislators. This is the opportunity that we can not just make the argument of the injustice of being arrested, but the injustice of not being equity players at the table.
And politically, the whole licenses process has been skewed toward the good old boy system, and for lack of a better word, and for people who have major capital. There's no room for people without capital. I do believe when we applied for our license, it was a considerable amount of money, and we know other African American business people who did it. Some have even lost retirement funds, savings, because they thought that they could get into this business and it would be a lucrative opportunity for them, or generational changing. But it never happened that way because of the good old boy system. Of course, many of us heard the horror stories about the commission and about certain people with conflicts of interest, and that's a major problem. Even the former chair of the Black Caucus ended up who the bill is named after was her mother, and she ended up going to prison, getting caught up into this. So this is a very, very volatile and lucrative business, and I think people will do just about anything to be a part of it.
It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. And when we're looking at a multi-billion-dollar industry on the black market, as well as legalizing, to get into the industry, it's worth the risk for the most part. But, areas or states like California, Denver, and other jurisdictions, they've proven that removing the cap or having boutiques or getting grants, that there's multiple ways that everyone could play at the table. On the East Coast, where growing outdoors is not ideal because of the climate and the risk, having indoor grow facilities, vertical grow facilities, and the variations are endless. So there's no reason that Maryland legislators cannot develop a bill that will cover or be equitable to all. We just have to, as community leaders and activists, make sure that we're holding them accountable, but also that individuals know, what exactly does this mean for us as voters, as residents, taxpayers, for the state, and how do we capitalize on it?
Okay.
And
Next question. Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, Lisa made a good point, and that was the next thing I was going to say. Oregon, California. Who else did you mention, Lisa?
Denver.
Denver. Colorado, yes, Colorado, where it really originated, especially in California. Um, I don't know why the names come to mind, but Snoop Dogg and Mike Tyson. Uh, there's, but there's so many opportunities out there. They say the market is actually saturated because
Mhm.
there's so many people making money. I think that's a good thing because when you talk about the law of supply and demand, that means the prices will go down, the prices
Yes.
will be competitive, and that's the kind of model that I think we should be looking forward to in Maryland. But one of our issues is we have some people who, this is not a conservative state, but at the
Mhm.
same time, they have many people have conservative views. And even in our own community, African American community, people have certain views about marijuana smoking, and they haven't been educated, as Lisa said, about the medicinal benefits of the plant.
Okay. The next question is, how does the state operate a cannabis program when it is illegal at the federal level? Richard?
Uh, I think Joe and Lisa are better qualified to answer
Okay.
it.
So
Let me.
Joe or Lee?
I'll,
I
uh,
can. I can. I can
I'll,
try and. I can
I'll,
try and start.
Okay.
no. I'll respond to that, Richard. Right. We've spent about 10 or more years
Okay.
working in this industry, but not only is it um, not uh, it's it's an industry that really is trying to work its way through a process. It's so lucrative that the states were willing to risk themselves
Hmm.
um, and have their business people to put up the necessary money. That's why it's directed to a very few selected people in the beginning, was because they
Mhm.
felt that they had the right governor in place, the right president of the Senate, and the right speaker of the House to move the program forward. And so they decided that it was the proper time for them to get into the industry because politics basically drives everything. So the state was willing to take the risk while you notice other states in the US have not moving forward with a plan such as Maryland has. Uh, so while we wait for the state, for the federal government to come online, Maryland has created a program that essentially benefits a very few people. And
Okay.
they are rich people who were close to the powerful individuals, to the president of the Senate at the time, I think it was Mike Miller, and then also the Speaker of the House. All of those individuals have people that they have appointed to the commission, including the governor at that particular point in time. So all of those guys now were responsible for setting up a system, selecting participants, and of course, those participants, if you look at them, who were selected, you'll find out that they have a close relationship to each one of those individuals that I mentioned. So they took the risk. Now, it works on the other end. Financially, financial side is that uh, you could not participate if you were depending on banks to finance you because banks can't finance you. They cannot legally finance you. They take a risk. Their charter to operate as a bank requires them to follow the federal government laws. So any bank that's participating is taking a huge, huge risk. Some have deemed it uh, enough money in the industry to be involved. And what they do is if you're going to be a banking at their industry, I'm just saying putting money from cannabis into a bank is illegal. So what some have decided that it is lucrative enough for us to take that risk, and they pass on that risk to the cannabis growers.
Mhm.
So while for you as a business person, it might not charge you anything for your account, they pay a premium. And now, if you go into any of those, can't the only one that you can actually go in and buy the product is the dispensary. So if you go into the dispensary and you try to use an ATM machine, you'll find that none of those bank ATMs They are all operated by individual proprietors who have taken the role.
Community banks.
Yes, they've taken the role. There's about 3 to 4 banks. We developed a relationship with a bank out of Virginia who was willing to take the risk, and we established a relationship with the president, and it's a state chartered bank. Now, this is a difference. A state chartered bank is not under the auspice of a federal government. So you put your money in there. No, it's not. So you can put your money in there. There is no guarantee if that bank goes out of business that you're guaranteed to, like you are with FDIC, because they don't come in and guarantee your money. You just lose, they lose, but it's lucrative enough for them to take that step to get in the game. So that's what you're up against here. And it becomes a major impediment to minority business people because normally they don't have that kind of capital. So when Bruce mentions the names like Snoop Dogg and you say, Bruce?
Mike Tyson.
Mike Tyson.
The reason why they can get into the business is because they have cash. They have cash like our large major players in the state of Maryland. They can take their money and they can invest. While a business person like Lisa who applied, or like maybe we've had about 100 people to apply, they can't afford to take that risk. Even though during the last session where we tried to correct differences that affected minority businesses, they couldn't get to the table. A lot of the minority businesses risked money that they really couldn't lose. They put hundreds of $1,000s, like Bruce said earlier, into that application process. Just with the application process alone, it cost one business that I know of over $600,000 of cash that came from pension funds, retirement funds, just to play and to lose, and then to go to court to try to prove that she was discriminated against. Now, everybody at the table here had a minimum. I think the minimum license, every time you submitted an application for a license, it cost you $2,000.
Yes.
So if you had 3 licenses that you were applying for, that's $6,000. You don't get that money back. So you just lose it. You got 100 firms, the state of Maryland takes that money, and you don't get awarded a license. So it's a very risky process. And if we don't deal with that up front, we all think that, okay, well, this is going to be a fair process. It's going to move forward. It's going to get approved. And now African Americans are going to come to the table. No, you are not. Because if they don't write the regulations properly, then you won't have the necessary cash to invest in this. And it's as Lisa said earlier, it's a very, very tough and competitive business. Now, what Bruce said earlier was that, okay, it might be better if you've got a lot of competitors to a certain degree. If you have a lot of competitors at the table and you put a lot of money getting into the game and they lower your profit margin, they can drive you out of business too. So when they put this final regulations in place, it's going to be very important that they, and that's not really the government's job to protect the individual who's investing, but they can't create a open market, a bunch of, and I think it was called in California, a bunch of cowboys, literally, where it was unregulated. Everybody on the corner had cannabis they were selling, and the numbers were driven so low that everybody was filing bankruptcy and going out of business. There's got to be a delicate balance that you don't oversaturate your area. And that's got to be done between a very short period of time from January until April when it gets out to General Assembly.
You see, community banks, in going back to how it's financed, community banks and the state can create a fund, as California have done, to help encourage more participation by minorities in it. But it's also the regulations. When the additional licenses, were awarded for minorities was 5 additional licenses. The difference in the scoring was 0.7%. I mean, 0.7 amongst those that were in the top 50. So the scoring criterion needs to change, and we have to assess how what does that look like? How do we maintain control but also increase participation at the same time?
There's another aspect to this, and I haven't heard much from bar associations, but we also have to recognize there are many defense attorneys who make their money out of representing people who get caught. The court system makes a lot of money, and so we've never really evaluated the impact. But not many defense attorneys that I know of have come out in support of the deregulation of marijuana or decriminalization of marijuana, unless they had a direct stake uh, in one business or another. And so we have to keep that in mind as we.
That's a ballot issue that we're looking at this November as well. Maryland is moving to change the Constitution so that the court will become the Supreme Court of Maryland, opposed to and the appellate court will be named differently, giving it more power. So if we are losing in the courts, we have to educate the voters on exactly what's happening, because the language when it appears on the ballot would be so confusing that they won't know what they're voting for. And that's one of the things that where we're losing in the courts. We have to pay attention to the judge process, and we have to pay attention to the language that's being presented to change the Constitution.
Okay, so the next question is, what role does the governor, the Maryland General Assembly, Attorney General, and Controller have concerning cannabis?
All right. So the governor is going to appoint the Medical Marijuana Commission. Most or all of the members. I would assume that the General Assembly is going to make a similar regulatory body that will probably have majority appointment from the governor, but probably still some appointment from the Senate President and the Speaker. The Attorney General is going to have a lot of a role in, particularly with what Joe was talking about with bank seizures. The more this goes on, the more banks are going to invest in this, and the federal government could just seize the money from one bank or from another bank. That's a situation where the Attorney General might need to step in. Obviously, also for actually doing the expungements and really crafting all of the language down to the T about how all of this would go. Regarding expungements, are they going to be automatic? When are they going to be applied? Is it just for one case if you simply were charged with possession? Or what if you had possession in another crime? Is it expunged? So a lot of those really important legal questions. And the comptroller is going to have a lot of the regulatory power. Before the comptroller was regulating alcohol, was regulating tobacco, the General Assembly scaled that back. I think that with Learman, the comptroller is going to have some regulation, at the very least, in how the taxing goes, in measuring up how it goes, and hopefully making sure it's spent in an equitable manner.
What's important here is we need to remember that Brian Frost was part of the reason, as the Attorney General, that the first 15 licenses were awarded to all white men. Where it was presented in a letter to him, a question that was asked if you could consider geographical location opposed to race in determining who is awarded the license. So the Attorney General will play a critical role in helping to define what Richard is saying for expungement, but also the legality of who can receive the license, the licensing criterion, which is why we had to sue the state to get additional licenses so that race could be a criteria opposed to just geographical location.
Okay.
On that one, on the Attorney General, I'll just say this. there was a point in time when the Attorney General requested an outside opinion, and the outside opinion, because they were moving in the second award of the license, with putting in parameters which would allow for licenses to go directly to minority individuals, specifically African Americans. And they did a opinion and sent it to the state's attorney general, and the opinion was this, that said the African American entities would be would be seriously um, harmed if they move forward with the same plan that they utilized in the first award of licenses. And that was sent to the General Assembly and the governor at that time. But they never moved with a real MBE program or a social program that would address it. They still went forward with a program that didn't follow the opinion of the outside consultant that the Attorney General hired.
Wow. Okay.
Well, and one more piece, the Maryland General Assembly, whether it be through legislation that goes through a different committee or a county delegation bill, can help to create mini licenses, or again do the zoning on where they can go, localized impact, localized hiring. The Maryland General Assembly in particular, I think the Prince George's County delegation and the Baltimore City delegation, they can and they should create licenses at the smallest levels possible. Like there should be municipal licenses like in Bowie and in Laurel and in Greenbelt, because I do agree there needs to be as much ability for different players to enter the market, with rather than people being grandfathered in, that people that already have the big licenses, and people especially that have the people from outside of Maryland that have business interests in this topic are completely kept out. That's one worry I have in particular for the upcoming several years, that there's going to be more of these like national firms that are pretty much just big pharma, cool big pharma, I guess you could call them, that are just going to go state to state buying this industry up and turning it just into alcohol.
That's correct. That's correct. And also along that line, that you also have to remember that this is like Richard just said, this is a very, very big market and people want to capture the market. So we have to be well aware that when we put in a structure, that the structure works best for citizens of the state of Maryland. Quite frequently what happens is that individuals, as has been said, outside of the state come in with big money. They buy lobbyists, they hire lobbyists. The lobbyists then influence people to go there in their direction. And so what happens very clearly, and we've seen it, is individuals end up being incarcerated who are elected officials because they fall for the few dollars that individuals have of paying them to push their bill forward, or to put assurances and clauses in the bill that would keep Black folk out of the market. That's what they do. They're powerful. Now, you really can't blame your lobbyists. You just can shake your head on the character of a person. But those individuals, they are hired by people, and their biggest thing is let me get paid. So essentially, they'll work for the large corporations. They won't support an African American if they can't make money off of the African American. That's just the nature of the evil of the game that we're playing at this particular level. So it becomes now is the time that we have to put as much energy and attention on this, regardless of the the pressure that comes on activists to comply, We can, as individuals, we have to realize the importance that we play in the process. We cannot be bought out by a system. We have to do this one the right way. And I think, Richard, we talked Sunday about the process that they use for sports betting, where they created about three different levels of participating. They created a super level, and that was for the pretty much the big sports guys who you couldn't really compete with. And those guys were charged a bit pretty substantial, I think about $1 million to get a sports betting license in the state of Maryland. They were the MGMs of the world, the fantasy football entities that wanted license, the Commanders, uh, football, Ravens, anybody who wanted to play at that level, they had more broad, and that the type of money they could earn was greater. Then there was a sub level that they also had, and that level was for smaller individuals that were playing in the minor leagues. Now, they actually selected those entities by General Assembly. So you ended up with, like in Charles County, you end up with a facility that's in Colonial Beach, Virginia, that has a betting facility. But they only wrote that entity in because they played an aggressive role in hiring lobbyists and campaigning to convince delegates and senators to support them. So the owner of that facility played his cards right. The other location in Charles County, they were only supposed to have one, got a license also at a sports facility, but he could not fulfill the requirement. He couldn't raise enough capital. He wasn't strong enough to stay in the game. He didn't see the benefit of participating. But the Blue Crab Stadium was also in the game, but that was the second level. Individuals who couldn't compete against the Redskins and the Commanders and those guys who were playing at the top level. And then there was another level which allowed you to get in the game at about, I think, between 50 to 100,000. These are for bar owners. So if I've got a bar that I want to participate, then I can pay the state $50,000, and they'll allow me to do sports betting at my particular bar, and I can make money, and I can do it from my mobile app, which is how they structured, or I can do it from my facility. How they do their lottery when you sit back and you sit in those places and you play those games. That's what they do, and therefore they have put a structure into place that made more sense than what's being proposed. They never even thought about this on a cannabis level. And I think, Richard, we also took it another level that you added in the nonprofit or the community organization structure in the community.
I like that, yes, that they have an ability to own it.
Yes. And that's where pretty much nonprofits or community organizations can now participate. They will not be given maybe not even the $50,000, but they will be allowed to grow. But you then put those individuals come in at a lower level. And the way the state will probably do that is because their revenue generator is not going to be as much as the other locations, so they can't tax you as much. They would probably do that and limit you to the amount of market share that you can actually get.
Okay, so when you said nonprofits can enter this market or enter in the process, aren't they considered federal programs?
Yeah.
Are they getting exemptions from the federal government?
They would have to seek, and Bruce can tell you more about which nonprofit can do what.
The types of nonprofits. See, one of the things.
501c3 or go ahead.
I'm sorry, Joe. Go ahead.
Oh, no, you're okay. Go ahead.
When you're looking at cannabis as a whole, there's a lot of research that actually can take, that still needs to happen. Maryland is a bio research state. And we should not limit our thinking to just smoking flower. There's a lot of medicinal benefits as well as economic growth that can take place through research and analysis. So to look at nonprofits and how they play at the table or can play at the table, you have research or what's called think tanks as nonprofits that could just conduct studies. There's many different ways that you can approach the industry that doesn't have to be at a dispensary level. A vertical alignment, which will allow you to cultivate, research on what you're cultivating, and then create product lines for distribution through your process centers that could go to your dispensaries. So we have to, we're a thinking state. We're a state that's based off of technology and science, and we should be able to tap into that strength in this particular industry through our nonprofits.
And I like to support what she says. There's a lot more jobs than just selling the stuff. You know, there's a bigger industry there. You need farmers, you need chemists, and that sort of thing. But I also would think they would not look at this with a slanted eye, simply because, as you know, you have a nonprofit that you can get a temporary liquor license. Why wouldn't you be able to get?
Okay. Okay. I understand what you're saying. Okay.
Okay. Why wouldn't you be able to get a temporary gambling license or a temporary growing license for specific events? That would seem to be in line with your status as a nonprofit. The other thing is, as Lisa said, we're going to have to think out of the box. We always say that Maryland is a leader. Now is the opportunity for them to show that they truly are a leader when it comes to intellectual capital.
And I added the community associations with the stipulation that, like, in your kind of review process, you have to show where the money's going, because I wrote this bill, or wrote with this proposed additions to a bill for Baltimore City, with each district getting a certain number of licenses. Now, I can think there's some community associations that would love nothing more than having 5 dispensaries, all of them for the whole district in their one community. And with the certain way that the bill's written, that could get that particular community a lot of economic benefits. That would keep other communities from getting it. So if you have where a community association can do it rather than just an individual, it lets people pool their money easier. It helps to move that resource around the city to be more equitable and to actually affect more people. And then it gives it an additional means of returning revenue. If you have a community association doing that, it makes it a lot easier for them to, I don't know, purchase property, invest in the residents, and do other things for them. So like Lisa said, having nonprofits or community associations being able to access that market creates another way that people can pool the money to actually do it, and to give people another means of in that market of trying to do just new stuff.
Okay.
You know, it's going to be legal at the federal level. It's just a matter of time.
Right.
You have more states coming on board, and to really be in front of this is where we should be thinking right now. To go from our HBCUs to our community organizations that can focus in on teaching cultivations to our young people in urban districts, to be able to control what that looks like. Why does marijuana work better than opioids for depression, for Alzheimer's, for cancer? There's many benefits. And then looking at the recreational side, you have a liquor board in place. Why can't we develop boards for cannabis boards that would basically be able to scale and determine who should be awarded license in their own communities?
I agree.
Yeah, like right now at College Park, somebody sent me a picture. There's like probably the largest cannabis farm in the state of Maryland is on some agricultural land at College Park. It's going to be legal. It's already here. It's already being grown in huge capacities, mostly by sheriffs that happen to be Hogan donors. we need to expand the market in an equitable way.
Okay, so there are dispensaries existing in the city. I mean, there is one in Fells Point. There's one on 29th Street, West 29th Street. There's one on Broadway. So how were these people able to get in?
I think people miss the point. They think that when you get a dispensary, you're getting the cream of the crop. You're at the bottom of the crop.
Okay.
It would be analogous to the guy who stands on the corner and sells drugs, whereas there's some other guy, the big guy, who goes around and determines who gets the best product, who gets who gets everything, who's allowed to sell that product. And one of the prohibitive points of a dispensary is that you're at the beckoning call of some grower of some processor who decides whether or not you get the product that you need to sustain your business. And there's not a major business, you know. Someone told me, I don't know what the right figure is, but you know, the net on a dispensary is only like $100 to $200,000. And there was a point in Montgomery County when certain dispensaries couldn't get product because the people wouldn't sell to them. They had their favorites who they sold to. And so that's a major consideration as well.
The vertical alignment, for those that had vertical alignments, the growers, processors, and dispensaries were capitalizing on their license. So it's like cornering the market. My dispensary, my processing plant will profit more if you don't have access to marijuana. So increasing the number of growers, increasing the number of processors is a benefit to the marketplace opposed to not, you know. And when we're looking at that diversity across the board, we also are looking at the control factors. Liquor stores, I mean, the dispensaries in the legislation cannot operate in just any communities. There's laws like liquor stores cannot just be next to a school. So we have to look at, when we're talking about dispensaries, locations, the proximity to children. It's a lot of regulations surrounding it. So not all communities will qualify, especially in urban districts. Not all communities will qualify for having processors, growers, or dispensaries in their communities with the way the current legislation is written.
Okay. The next question is, what is the history of African American businesses participating in the ownership of growing, processing, and dispensaries within the state of Maryland?
Slave history. You know, I mean, literally, that's the whole point that we were talking about with the Attorney General. When marijuana was introduced to voters of Maryland, it was introduced as this, like the lottery, is going to help us, our economy, medically. You know, you have a lot of individuals that was addicted to opioids. I myself was in a car accident and was prescribed opioids and had a totally adverse effect. It was totally negative. But taking small amount of marijuana decreased my dependency on opioids, brought me back to a healthier state. And I was able to salvage my business and get back into being an active participant in life, opposed to opioids that was killing me. So when we're looking at the benefits and how individuals intentionally locked out Black people from gaining access, it was evident in the laws that the Attorney General, the letter that the Attorney General wrote, that basically says that no, you cannot put a race-based program in place, that you have to do geographical. There's laws that literally the initial 15 white men made sure that they lobbied to protect, to keep the lockout of African Americans, even though we were the most egregiously affected. Maryland has a history of making excuses for keeping Black people out of major industries that come. Gaming, offshore wind energy, and marijuana are just examples of what needs to change and how we need to move forward to secure that we can stop such practices.
Okay. Richard?
Can't hear you, Richard.
Can't hear you, Richard.
Lisa and Joe are such experts. I have nothing I need to add.
Okay. How about you, Mr. Branch?
I think we've pretty much covered everything that we could possibly cover. I would just like to encourage all of your viewers to come out and vote
Mhm.
uh, for this legislation, and as we attempt once again to break down a barrier in our economic system.
Okay. So this is one of the next to last questions. What are the barriers to participating as African Americans in this market?
Capital
Money.
politics.
Money, capitalizing the business. I mean, the industry is capitalization is key. Putting money into it. Also, laws. I mean, we're changing the Constitution to make our courts Supreme Courts, so we have the ability that we can change the Constitution and laws and legislate equality to make sure that greater participation happens. Those are our two main barriers: capitalization and our laws.
Okay. Joe?
I'll have to agree. I think they really covered it well. And I think right now, since we are trying to elect the governor, that we have his ear, um, I think it's important for individuals to know that Wes Moore um, has told me specifically, and the lieutenant governor, that they are supportive of this legislation. I'm not too sure that Dan Cox is. I wouldn't want to say what his where he would go with something like this, but my imagination would tell me that probably, since he's a strong supporter of Trump, and I've never seen Trump do anything for African Americans, that he would not be a strong advocate for us getting this passed. I think it would hurt us. It would put us 4 years back. So I urge all voters who are out there to make sure that they get to the polls and vote for him and on November the 8th. And it's vital. We sometimes lose the vision of what really drives the country. And we lose that, and we make the wrong decisions based on the fact that we've never played the game before. This is a huge game, and unless you know it intricately and have seen it in action, um, we sometimes just make an assumption that our legislative process doesn't make any difference at all. But let me tell you what happens is, if the legislators don't know you're talking, if we don't do these shows that you're doing here to let them know and get the message out to them, they will go again. We've seen them go. I'm not saying that they're going to go this. They'll go to the highest bidder, and we'll be left out again as an African American community. So our concern has to be on the steps of the Capitol, and we have to be insistent, because we don't have the money to put into a prolonged advocacy campaign.
Mm-hmm.
It's very difficult for us to do. The General Assembly is not the same General Assembly when we were promoting it. You could go to Annapolis. This time around, you can't go to Annapolis. You got to go online and get your message, and you're limited on the times that you can go online. If you don't go online, your message does not get heard. Your testimony does not get heard. All those things that people just really don't understand, how this process has been so streamlined that Africans like you or me, or like Lisa, like Bruce, or anybody else who's participating in the process, they even have barriers to keep you out. So, you know, we have to be real aggressive in terms of making sure that our chairs of the committees who are going to be handling this or have the right language. And we gotta insist that the governor, we have the right governor and the right senators and all of them understand that this is a big money play. And if we lose this one, we lose a big one. I mean, our kids and generation of kids will again be working in a sharecropping position where the large corporations are controlled by people who don't look like me and you. They have control again of the system. So we'll lose twice. We will have been jailed. Our kids would have been jailed. We would have been incarcerated, and then we would have left out of an economic opportunity.
One last thing, Joe. The African American, we would invite everybody to become a part of the African American. Only if you're supportive of this issue, the African American Cannabis Association. We know that there are a lot of grassroots people who want to get involved, who want to own dispensaries, who want to play in the game. And some years ago, I don't even know how many years it's been, we formed the African American Cannabis Association. Joe, what they need to do?
Yep.
They need to go to our website.
Okay.
And let me see if I can change glasses so I can see the website.
It's aacma.com.
Okay, you
What
got
is it again? What is it?
aacma.com.
AACMA.com.
Yes.
No,
AAMCA. No, Lisa, www.aamca-usa.com.
yeah,
You- right.
Let's try it again. AAMCA-usa.com.
Okay. We'll
Now,
put
see,
that.
Joe, if you had your cannabis intake, you would be
My
able
vision would have been better.
Okay.
So, you know what? One of the things that we, in ending with, we have a new governor, whoever that may be, that's going to be take this oath in January. What we need to be prepared with is our legislative agenda that will have this at the top of our legislative agenda, along with housing, to demand that the language of inclusion and drill down to what exactly that means are in place.
Was African American Cannabis Association?
African American Medical Cannabis Association.
Medical.
Yes.
Okay, so okay.
And also, let me leave a telephone number too as well for those who are listening. You can feel free to call 240-286-8567. That's another way to reach us.
Okay. Now the last question, while I'm putting this up on the for those to see, what are the laws that are being proposed in legislation session right now, or are going to be?
We have not, and they have kind of held this close to their chest. They've been very guarded on what they're creating, but I have had an opportunity to converse with the new person who's going to be handling this, C.T. Wilson. He's the chairman of the powerful Economic Matters Committee. I think it's Economic Matters. Is that the right one? Mm-hmm. Appropriations. I'm sorry. Appropriations. And so that's going to be up to him. And he has told me that he's working on this, and it's going to be a bill that's going to make sure it correct all the prior discriminatory legislation that was created before. And we are going to reach out to him for a meeting with him. But also, we're already working with the lieutenant governor. If the lieutenant governor is Aruna Miller, she's well aware. She's already supportive of what we're proposing to do. So, however, I think we're in much good hands if our voters get out and make sure that she becomes the next lieutenant governor, along with West Governor as governor. But those are the impactful ways that we've found. You won't win this case in court. Not at all. See, what happens is very similar to what's happened on the federal level, is that when leaders, and that's the president and that's the governor on the state level, get in, they stack the courts in their favor. So if there's a lawsuit, and we've seen it happen this time, that African Americans are challenging any discriminatory practice, it gets stirred to this judge who's a Republican judge in Annapolis. Every case that we've came up with goes and guess what we have gotten? We've gotten a decision that didn't turn out to be favorable for the African American company. And so we got to remind ourselves while we're playing this game on a federal level in our court systems, that's detrimental to African Americans, even the right to vote. We're also getting it at a state level too. So we got to be aware of what we do when we select certain people and put them in place, these powerful positions. It's not just the governor, it's also your court system.
Exactly. It's one of the things that when we're looking at language, the judge agreed that the practice that the Maryland Commission used to award the first 15 license were unfair, but the language in the law protected them and gave them the right to do so. So if we don't understand or know how to craft it, those are some of the things we need to be conscious of, and our legislators need to be held accountable for presenting such a bill that literally doesn't give voters or consumers any protection at all.
Okay, now I do have a question. So before the election, is there anything that we could show the viewers that they would be like any of the amendments or anything that they're going to be voting for in the general election? Would we be able to show that to them so that they're aware of what they're looking at, and so that we could kind of break everything down so that when they're going into the polls, they're not confused and they go the other way?
Yeah, we can structure that and provide it for you. You're probably gonna have to call another show to do that. That'll deal with those things, or to make sure that you get out. We got to figure out how we can get it out to the community. Okay. And we're certainly gonna get it out on our website. But yeah, and and they have to understand that this is not what the state is committed to do. This is what we're pushing from our perspective, what is good for the African American business person and the African American community.
Okay, so this show is part 1, where we're educating and giving you information about what's going on. Part 2 is next week, where we'll actually be talking about the political, how politics plays a huge role, the legislation, and we're going to lay that out. I want to thank Donnie Glover and Black USA News for giving me this opportunity and this platform to host shows like this. But I also want to thank Mr. Branch, Miss Elias, Mr. Gaskins, and Richard, who had to leave, for being here, educating, and giving us a fresh perspective. I want to let the viewers know that this is our opinions. This is not law. This is our opinions, and we're giving you factual information, but it's based off of our viewpoint. So please like, share. If you want to make comments, if you would like to be on the show, put that you can either give me a call at 443-355-1892, or you can email me at quandra.gaines@gmail.com. Anyone else want to have any further final comments?
Thank you for having me. And as always, it's been such a pleasure.
All right, Mr. Branch, anything you would like to say? Okay, so most important, the one thing I really want the message is to go out to vote. If you have not registered, register. This is a very important election. Not only are we going to be making history, but it's very important that you are a well-informed voter, that you're not just just pressing buttons just to get out the polls. So on that note, good night and
Good
thank
night.
you. See you next week.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Like the pencil wrote, that's all she wrote.
Good night.
Okay. Have a good night.